policy, and that RMA policy, planning documents and the like. So let's say that's the Regional Resource Management Plan. After that goes through your RMA process of drafting, notifications, submissions, hearings, potential environment court appeals and whatnot, you end up with a plan that this organisation and others begin to administer, either through resource consent decisions, compliance action, or they implement it
No, it's not what
for a whole bunch of other things.
Gavin, can I just cut this short a little bit? Can you say is this our most important planning document?
Planning document as
Well,
an
sorry,
RMP? Or this Mitchell-Dace report?
No,
is
no,
most
the RRMP, how important is it to us? Is it up there or down there?
It's in the top three, I would
Yeah, that's
say.
what I was, sorry,
Yeah.
I was meaning, can you tell us where it sits in the level of importance? And it does all the things that I'm sure you're going to outline in great detail on, but I just wanted to get to the point. It's a really big, important document, isn't it? Okay.
All right.
Can you then? It does all sorts of things that we can watch the movie on, but can you tell me what its effect is in relation to the territorial local authorities and their planning? How important is it to them? In 5 words or less.
Can't be inconsistent.
One of the attachments to the Mitchell-Dace report does set out responses to a bit of an interview questionnaire with some of the TLA staff. 5 questions, 5 words or less. Legally, there are some clear legal obligations on the city and district councils to do things with, firstly, the regional policy statement provisions in the RRMP.
Yeah.
And district council, city councils cannot be inconsistent in their own plans and in their own consent decisions with content of our regional plan provisions. So
in addition, they must have regard to the regional plan when considering consent applications. So it's a very big document, isn't it?
Yep.
Thank
yep.
you.
Now, where's the next breadcrumb? You're obviously hitting somewhere.
Yes, I am, because I've got a series of questions. I wonder whether it's worth taking you to the conclusions and observations, which are on page 112 of the Dace report, item 5, the Dace report.
Page what?
112, 113.
At the very bottom, it's 112 or 36.
Okay,
Choose your poison.
Must be.
We're on the same page.
112, 130, yes.
It's page 112.
You've read it. That conclusions and observations.
Yes. So what I read in the report, I just wonder whether you can confirm for me, is a number of findings and frustrations. If you go down to the bottom, the report has highlighted a number of matters for further consideration, etc. Highlighted information gaps and a lack of availability monitoring, and frustration in being able to determine the respective AERs, etc. So that was a 2004 report review, the same as the Dace, similar to the Dace report, wasn't it? So this report confirms that from 2004 to 2018, the exact same issues are reported once again over that 14 years. Am I correct in drawing that assumption?
There are some similarities there, yes, yep. And you'll be aware that the Regional Resource Management Plan was originally proposed back in 2000.
1999, wasn't it?
2000.
The first one's the second generation operative 2006.
Second generation.
Yeah, yeah.
2006.
And it became operative after going through submissions and environment court appeals and the like in 2006.
You want to be careful you're not leading the witness here.
Would I be correct in assuming that, based on the respective reviews that have taken place, and the fact that there have been a very limited range of outcome measures, either unknown, as you foreshadowed before, that what we've got is a dysfunctional regional resource management plan that essentially is a disaster area for this council. And I'd be overstating that if I...
So I'd like to answer that one, Mr Chair. The report itself notes that there has been a significant investment by the council since the current RRMP went operative in the areas of particularly soil science and biodiversity land cover. And one of the things we don't have is good longitudinal data to see how we're going relative to the rules within the plan, and therefore to measure the effectiveness. It also notes a considerable additional investment proposed in the long-term plan in a number of these areas. What is true to say is that this council, over the intervening period, has invested heavily in water science, but it hasn't in the terrestrial landscape as much, and we're now playing catch-up on that. So I think it's fair to say that every regional council in New Zealand, to some extent, has been playing catch-up on science to demonstrate whether or not the rules that were set in place in the first and second generation plans have indeed been met. And we've still got work to do, and it will be an ongoing job to fill those data gaps.
I accept that, James, accept that there is a reason that there's been a lack of progress on the measures. I come to the other aspects of the plan, which are to do with the reports from the local authorities, which are demonstrating either a total ignoring of the plan, non-mentioning of the plan, and not considering the plan in their planning documents. So I'm asking, is it true that the survey results reflect that the plan has failed to do its task to inform and direct local authorities in their planning processes? Am I right in that?
I don't think it's fair to characterise it that the TLAs have failed to take the plan in its totality into account in its own plan making and resource consent decision making. That's far too generic of a sweep.
But there are issues, several occasions the report goes to that issue and segments it by elements of the plan and demonstrates that in fact they haven't paid respect to the document. I've read the document, and that's the takeout I've taken out, but I might have a jaundiced view of the world, which most people say I do. I just go to one final example, which I'm really concerned about, and that occurs on page 108, or 32, whichever poison you like. At 4.2.3, section 3.7, management of organic material. Section 3.7 received general consensus that had never been considered relevant to refer to in TLA by TLA planners. Comment was, however, made that this issue of management of organic material was relevant in creating the situation leading to the Havelock North drinking contamination. So that tells me, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or totally, off the planet with observation, which I'm sure you will, that our document, designed to create the environment to protect the public and our land, has manifestly failed, and it is needing of major review, not in the long term but immediately.
Are you asking?
I'm asking that question.
Are you asking whether it's the RRMP that needs review in
Yes.
that respect,
Yes, I do.
or the? Because I think the issue here that's being highlighted is that the district plans and the practice by the territorial authorities has been insufficient in regard to giving effect to what is already in the regional resource management plan.
But if you read the feedback from the local authorities, they are saying the plan in many respects is not providing the guidance that they need to populate their own plans.
Well, I think that's true, and with respect to a large number of issues, and that is part of the ongoing plan development process. And look, I draw your attention to the tank plan change process that's seeking to remedy a large number of gaps in the existing RRMP with respect to land and water management practice. And this is part of the evolution that New Zealand is going through in terms of the maturity of its regulatory frameworks.
Any further questions?
So, well, at least, Councillor Curtin, your things are actually mentioned. I'm looking at the RRMP and I'm looking at 1.6, iwi environmental management principles, iwi concepts of regional management, 1.5, the Māori dimension, 1.6.2.2, the Māori management system, and then I look at the heading of this report and I looked and looked and looked for anything remotely Māori on the effectiveness of that. It's not mentioned at all. And I suppose my question is, why not? And given we met with tangata whenua reps of Tank yesterday, and they were very forthcoming at some of the challenges, some of the good things and some of the challenges. And my concerns with the outstanding water bodies was the way of the cultural assessment was taking place, what the process was. And so I'm asking, has this been included? If it's been excluded, why? And isn't it time to review the effectiveness of this in regards to the regional plan? And I might add, with other TLAs as well, because up and down the Hawke's Bay Regional District, we have the same challenges. So, Pēhea.
So in terms of scope of this work, the planned pieces of work relating to land and freshwater management were not within the scope of this Mitchell-Dace exercise. So therefore, anything to do with whether the existing plan deals adequately with outstanding water bodies, lakes and all the rest of it, it wasn't.
That's not what I'm asking.
It wasn't evaluated.
I'm asking about the effectiveness of working with Māori on the regional resource management plan. Has there been a review done on that? And if not, why not?
In a word, no, it's not done. Why not? It was not within the agreed scope that this committee had considered back in June, particularly because this report focused on the RRMP's stated anticipated environmental results, AERs. If my memory serves me correctly, Chapter 1 of the RRMP is around the introduction and regional context for the plan. It in itself does not have any AERs stated in it.
So therefore the cases with Ngāti Kāinga Iwi, with the Board of Inquiry, which had a heavily involved Māori involved in it, and we've got one, I think, Plan Change 5 now with Ngāti Kāinga Iwi involved, doesn't qualify for an AER, that doesn't put it on the radar.
Doesn't put it on the radar within the
Scope of the
content of the Regional Resource Management Plan. It is, well, I'm pretty confident it's on the radar of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and it's what broader relations with tangata whenua in all manner of things we do.
Then my question is, why have it in the plan anyway if it's void? If you're not going to do anything with it, if you're not going to regard it or prioritise it, why have it in the Regional Resource Management Plan at all?
Well, I'd note in the tank plan change, for example, that there is considerable work being devoted to ensuring that the values, aspirations and expectations of tangata whenua are reflected not only in the policies and objectives but also in the rules of the tank plan change, and we're doing that, I guess, on a catchment by catchment basis. It could be an alternative that we step back from that approach and we look at effectiveness in terms of partnerships with tangata whenua as reflected through the RRMP region-wide. I would put it to you that would be an enormous undertaking. It's one that we're not resourced to do at the present point in time, and our continued recommendation as staff would be to take a catchment by catchment approach so we deal with this community by community. But look, your point is valid. We don't at this point in time have a comprehensive evaluation of the extent to which the plan is providing for effective partnership with tangata whenua.
Well, it's not only stipulates in there about partnership, but it stipulates current areas of coverage of how to overlay and look at that. And that could have been adopted in the process for the outstanding water bodies. It could have been used. That's what I'm saying. It's great that it's being involved and included in the tank, But we've only got your word for it. I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen a draft plan. I don't know what's been included or what's excluded. And I'm sure there'll only be a few members, the members at Tank, but the whānau that are on the ground, I don't think they know either. So it could be that you review the effectiveness of those sections against a couple of resource consents, one being the Tank, given its priority. That's just another way of looking at it, as opposed to all or nothing, which is what our view was on the outstanding water bodies. Let's have a look at a catchment.
Well,
But we don't know what we don't know. We don't know anything about the Tank.
So look, I would anticipate, well, certainly yesterday's workshop had sought to fill that gap, and if it didn't, then we'll just have to have another go. But we do expect that there will be more opportunities for the extent to which Tank is addressing your concerns to be provided to you. So that is all part of the journey to the notification decision on the Tank plan change, which is anticipated later this year.
And I will note that the Regional Resource Management Plan is from 2006. So you've had from 2006 to at least deem to look at the effectiveness of your own clauses in the plan. So some work should be done on it.
Councillor Bailey. Thank you, Chair. Just further to that, the last conversation there, last questions there, looking at the introduction and scope on page 134, Mitchell Dash has commissioned to complete an effectiveness review of specified non-water related sections of the Regional Resource Management Plan. The scope of the project is to review those sections of the RRMP that haven't been subject to an RPS or plan changes and aren't proposed to be, so on and so on. So I'm a little bit confused as to why the effectiveness in terms of tangata whenua relationships is not considered, is considered to be not included in this particular review. I think it's quite a valid point because it is non-water related. I am a little confused by that. So it's something, again, we should be keeping in mind, I think, everything that we do. But in terms of a question, and you've brought up a number of times about how the monitor, it's been brought up quite clearly how the monitoring has let us down in terms of we haven't got the science there to give any definitive answers. And you mentioned, Gavin, that the long-term plan should be sufficient to tidy. It's going to tidy up a lot of that. Can we look to you in confidence that in another 10 years' time that we're not going to have the same issue again, that we are actually doing enough science to be able to fully inform us on the AERs?
Two things there. The science work program being proposed for delivery through the long-term plan is certainly going to get a boost. Also in the long-term plan lifespan, we've got the RRMP review anyway, so that in itself presents an opportunity for us to smarten up our AERs as they are currently stated into something much sharper, much more contemporary than of the early 2000s era.
I've got a question. A lot of this is external. What are we doing internal review stuff? Because regional council is not putting into practice its own ethics in terms of the fact that it's letting cows onto the riverbanks. It's not monitoring a lot of the gravel extraction. Some of the gravel extraction is being taken from the river. So it's all very well us monitoring other groups, but we need to set a good example ourselves.
So, Chair, with respect to cattle on the council's berms and within the flood protection zone, there is a review which has been undertaken over the last 12 months of that, and there's currently a trial in place in which grazing has been precluded, and the effects of that in terms of the performance of the flood monitoring network and the associated issues with managing weeds and pests and what have you. That trial is underway at the moment, and that is a matter which has been reported to and considered by the Environment Services Committee of Council. And with respect to gravel monitoring, we do have a program of monitoring the effects of gravel extraction across the region. And if you are aware of incidences in which those effects are not being adequately monitored, then I'd be more than happy to follow those up for you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Someone move that the recommendations be received, and we note Regional Resource Management Plan effectiveness report.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move, but I just wonder whether you could, with your indulgence, help me with, I appreciate this is not a decision-making paper, but I've got a further recommendation seeking further information. Or is it possible to do that in a situation? I think it is from record.
I think
It's
you
okay
should
with me, as long as
move,
it's
you
okay.
move, maybe when the motion be received, and then you simply add another part to your motion, putting your request in the form of the motion, then it will become the motion, and if it gets a second, it will be then, and if it gets a majority, it will be passed. That's how to do it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that sage advice, and therefore,
Yeah, to help.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm happy to move the recommendation to receive and note the report, and add a further recommendation that staff produce a report to the next RPC, setting out a timetable for the urgent review of the RRMP in order to address the issues raised in the 2004 and 2018 review.
We have a seconder for that.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favour?
Well, can we speak to it?
You can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, this paper troubled me greatly, as you may have gathered, and it really goes to the issue that this is our key document. This is it. This is the Holy Grail, the one that guides, under the Resource Management Act, guides us and subsequently guides resource management right across the region, and that, you know, that's what it says in the legislation and in the the RRMP itself. What concerned me, aside from my fetish for putting in place,
This is confession, right?
it is confessional, putting in place robust measures of performance, and you'll note that we're unable to measure our performance going back from 2004 to 2018, and the review identifies a number of areas throughout our performance that the word used is unknown, and to me that's simply unsatisfactory to go for that period of time, particularly when in 2004 that was particularly noted. But that aside, the conclusions and observations also say that such information gaps have remained a source of frustration in this current review, and these comments and recommendations remain valid despite the passage of time since 2004. It is therefore recommended the findings of both 2004 report and this current report are addressed in the forthcoming review of the RMP, with a priority for council compliance and monitoring programs to be aligned to provide regional planning effectiveness monitoring. So it's going, the review itself says much more, Mr. Chair, than you got some of the AERs wrong. It's saying our own internal monitoring and compliance response is not aligned to our own RMP. And then it goes to say, in terms of more immediate action, we understand that, it's in regard to a comment in regard to the TAs and their response to the document are similarly demonstrating, if you like, non-alignment with the document. So to me, they are important issues to examine and for Council to attend to with more urgency than I suggest than laissez-faire, let's do this piecemeal as we go along, perhaps by 2020 we might be there. So my request to put a timetable so that we're clear of where we're heading, and we can measure performance, and that's what we're looking to do here. Measure performance can be considered, and we have a greater level of confidence that this council is performing its role. And I can't help but go back to the commentary around the Havelock North water contamination issue and the role that this council played in overseeing the consents involved and the management process involved. Sorry, Councillor, did you have a comment? Was there a problem?
You're doing well.
Thank you, Councillor. So with those words, Mr Chair, I'd like to recommend that we proceed in this direction.
Mr Chairman, can I just inquire of staff, the Chief Executive, without diminishing the value of the work that Councillor Curtin wants to be undertaken, given that I understand this committee still meets monthly, is it realistic to be requiring a report of this nature in that very short time frame, given all of the rest of your very considerable obligations?
Well, the report we will be providing will be restating essentially the work programs that we have in train at the moment, the consequences of any adjustment to that, and I guess will therefore be over to the committee and ultimately council to determine whether or not it is prepared to amend those work programs to provide for what is being sought here. In addition, I'd suggest we're probably heading towards a staff submission to the long-term plan for increased resourcing over and above which has currently been consulted on.
As a seconder, could I make a few comments?
You may if you must.
I do. I think it needs a bit of clarification about this. Firstly, I feel on occasions some sympathy for the staff when they put up a paper that looks it's pretty bland and suddenly it runs in every direction. And I think this is one of the things we've got here today. So in terms of the issues raised about tangata whenua, if we were going to have a review of that, I think this would be one of the last firms we'd engage for this sort of work. I mean, seriously.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't want it to be included in that. So I just think there's that. The second article about the part about this is that yes, there's often a disjunct between the things that we do and local councils do, but I don't think we very often take into account the cycles that councils work in, and that they have their own planning things, and it can be sometimes a few years before they get round to doing their plan. They're not immediately and directly connected, so there are long levers and there are disconnections here. The third point I'd make is that when it comes down to science on these things, I often feel that we're requiring more out of the science to get the measurements than we're actually going to get out of it in value. I think very often we look to all these sort of numbers and things to measure, and the cost and expense of doing it is completely disproportionate to the value that we get out of it. So we always want the numbers. So what I would like in the report to come back is there to be a bit more context around what we're doing here, a bit more context in how our RMP interacts with council, so we get a bit more explained, and how we'd expect that arrangement to be between ourselves and the other councils. And when they're talking about the science and the measures, what sort of measures are we using? Are we using things which are appropriate but not necessarily precise? Could we do more? If we're going to do more, what's the investment like to put into this, and what are we going to get out of it? So very often the investment is not worth it, but we haven't got that as a clear, explicit decision-making process. Do you know what I mean? And I think we need the paper could be more helpful in describing that, so we get to the issues which have been raised here, because I think there's been a bit of a mismatch here. So I'm not diminishing at all the concerns that have been raised. I just think we've got ourselves in the wrong location. So a paper that helps describe those bigger contextual issues would be helpful, and we can then make better decisions, in my view. So I don't want a necessarily big paper, but I think we need to describe a bit more about the context here.
I've just got the medicine for you. Yesterday we listened to a presentation by Dr. Cole, who introduced other measures that are not like in the main we look at the economic aspects and whatever, but we don't factor in the cultural, the environmental, and all those other issues. And what his work showed was that when you put too much emphasis on the economic, the cultural and the social deprivation increases.
That's right.
So maybe at our next meeting we will ask him to come.
Very good.
Okay, so back to our. No more questions. All in favour?
Oh, hang on.
Thank you.
Hang on, Mr. Chair. Can I narrate a reply?
Go on, say no.
So in concluding the debate, Mr. Chair, what I'm suggesting is...
I seconded your motion to help you.
Yes, you
You're not
did.
going to reply to my comments.
I'm just winding the the debate up, Seconder. Mr. Chair, I'm seeking no more than essentially a clarification of the next steps proposed in the staff's paper. It advises no immediate next steps being recommended. However, the next breath in 10 of the document says the opportunity presents, it's an opportunity in the 2018-28 plan to revisit the priorities. So all I'm seeking is the timetable that the staff anticipate these amendments to be made or recommendations to be pursued. So we're clear on what that direction is. The paper suggests it. I'm asking that it's explicit and that we measure that performance. So I look forward to the next iteration of this paper and the timetable we're going to work to.
Thank you. All in favour of the motion?
Aye. Aye.
Right.
With pleasure.
Thank you. Against?
No.
Right. Get this spoke now.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Through the chair, I just apartheid. Because the causes I stated are in the Regional Resource Management Plan,
Yeah.
and they've never been reviewed on any effectiveness on anything, I would hate to see it dropped. So I don't know when to put that
When
on.
we get Dr. Cole to do his presentation, a lot of these
Discuss that
issues will be arisen, and we can get into that.
Okay.
Okay.
Kia ora.
So we are now on item 11.
Can't do the oil and gas, you just send those people away.
Right, we're up to Chair. Lead us forward. Relentlessly forward.
I will have to issue sleeping pills.
Is that Star Trek? What is that?
See the PowerPoint to Leanne?
Relentlessly.
So where we going? We're moving forward.
Far distant galaxy.
Mary Ann Baker.
I think this one is, they flip-flop back and forth, so I think the next one is a cup of tea. Not sure I have that.
Gee, I want to say that if you don't get the afternoon smoker organised shortly, the union delegate will be in here sort of calling everybody out.
We're just noting it up. I'm sure you can deal with them. We'll delegate that task to you.
I can see the councillor from Wire on his phone texting him already.
I'll win.
Where's the text?
We're just looking for a presentation if you want to have a cup of tea.
Cup of tea. Yeah. Cup of tea time, isn't it?
Yeah, cup of tea. Yeah.
This is the
You have your wish.
Is this the last item?
No, it's not the last item.